The cage was built for something no one could control. It was deep inside the center of Station Centra 7, guarded by layers of steel, lasers, and force fields. Every alien who passed it felt fear in their bones. Inside that cage was Zarnok, the galaxy's deadliest predator. 10 feet tall, covered in black scales with acid dripping from its fangs, Zarnok had destroyed fleets and eaten entire hunting squads. Many believed it couldn't be captured. But it was now here, roaring and slamming into the energy walls, shaking the very floor of the station. Security officers stood far back, weapons ready, watching the creature in case it broke free. Scientists from every corner of the galaxy had come to study it. Some just wanted to watch. Others took bets on how long it would survive in captivity. None of them cared what Zarnok felt. To them it was a beast, a monster, a symbol of terror. And to the Galactic Council it was proof that humans were foolish for thinking they could change the nature of monsters. Then came Ilara. She was small, quiet, and barely noticeable among the crew. Just a human girl with short brown hair, dressed in a maintenance uniform. She worked on lights, cleaned vents, and fixed broken doors. No one had ever seen her raise her voice. Most didn't even know her name. But one day, as the council members argued and the predator growled, she walked straight into the observation room carrying a plate of food. Everyone froze. She had no armor, no escort, no weapons. Just a tray with raw meat and a bottle of water. The guards shouted at her to stop. One officer reached for his blaster. But the station commander, curious or perhaps too shocked to think, raised a hand to stop them. "Let's see what she thinks she's doing," he said. Ilara stepped closer to the cage. The predator turned its burning yellow eyes toward her. Its claws scraped the floor. Its tail twitched like a whip ready to strike. Everyone held their breath. She didn't flinch. She sat down on the cold metal floor, just a few feet away from the energy field. She placed the tray carefully near the edge where the creature could see the food. And then she spoke. Her voice was soft. "I know you're hungry," she said. "I would be too." The predator didn't move at first. Then it let out a deep growl, like thunder trapped in its chest. Some thought it would leap at her, throw itself against the cage and tear her to pieces if it could. But it didn't. It just stared at her. Minutes passed. The room was silent, except for the sound of Zarnok's breathing and the hum of the force field. Ilara kept talking. Not with fear, not with command, just calm words. She talked about Earth, about wild animals, and how humans learned to live with them. She told a story about her father feeding a wounded wolf in the mountains and how that wolf had once saved her life. "You're not the only one who's been trapped," she said. "Sometimes we're all cages in our own way." And then something happened that no one expected. Zarnok moved. It didn't charge. It didn't roar. Slowly, almost carefully, it walked to the edge of the cage. It crouched low, sniffed the meat, and after a pause, it ate. Gasps echoed through the room. Council members leaned forward. Scientists whispered in shock. The guard dropped his blaster. Never before had Zarnok accepted food, not when others tried, not even when it hadn't eaten in days. But it accepted hers. The next day, she came again. This time with fresh water and more meat. The same thing happened. Zarnok waited for her, watched her, ate only when she sat and spoke. A third day passed, then a fourth. Every time, more crew members came to watch. The cameras recorded it. Aliens. On other stations started streaming the footage. Some called it a trick. Others said she used drugs. But no one could explain what they saw with their own eyes. The predator, the galaxy's deadliest killer, had not only calmed, it seemed to recognize her. On the 5th visit, Ilara said nothing at all. She just sat down, and Zarnok came forward, on his own. Slowly, it crouched, placed its giant head near the force field, and stayed still. Ilara looked at it for a long moment. Then gently, she placed her hand against the energy shield just inches from its snout. The creature made a sound, not a growl, not a snarl, but something softer. A low humming vibration that none of the experts could recognize. But Zarnok wasn't looking at anyone else, only her. The galaxy had feared this predator for years. Entire civilizations had run from it, hunted it, tried to kill it. But no one had ever done what she had done. She fed it, and it listened. News of Alara and the predator spread faster than light. Every space network, every alien news channel, every gossip feed across the galaxy had one story: the human who fed the monster. Some laughed, others called it dangerous, but most were simply confused. Why hadn't the predator attacked her? Why did it only eat when she was there? Alara didn't care about the attention. She wasn't trying to prove anything, she just came each day carrying the same tray of raw meat and water. Every time she sat down in the same place, just outside the cage, and waited. And every time, Zarnok moved toward her without growling, without rage, like it was waiting too. By the 7th visit, the guards didn't even raise their weapons. The scientists had started tracking the predator's heart rate, and it dropped every time she arrived. For the first time since its capture, it looked calm. But no one expected what happened next. She came in like always. Same uniform, same quiet steps. The predator was pacing inside its cage. The moment she appeared, it stopped. It turned, and then slowly it walked toward her and sat. The creature that had torn through battleships now sat like a trained animal. Not because someone forced it, but because it chose to. The room fell silent. Alara smiled and placed the tray down. "You remembered," she said softly, like she was talking to a friend. Zarnok didn't eat right away. Instead, it looked at her, not past her, not at her hands, at her. Its eyes, those glowing yellow eyes, weren't wild or violent. They weren't empty. There was something behind them, something that no one had believed it had: awareness. The lead scientist, a three-eyed Trelvarian, gasped. "That look," she whispered. "That's not instinct, that's recognition." The council members argued for hours after that. "It's too dangerous," said one. "She's making it worse, it might be pretending." But the data didn't lie. The predator's aggression levels had dropped nearly 70%. It was eating regularly. It had stopped roaring at night, and only Alara could do it. The next day, they let her stay longer. That's when everything changed. Alara sat beside the cage as usual. She began speaking, telling Zarnok about Earth animals again. "We had lions and bears," she said. "Powerful ones. But even they weren't monsters. They just wanted to survive." Zarnok moved closer to the force field. Very slowly, it raised one clawed hand. It pressed the back of its hand carefully against the energy wall, right where she had placed hers before. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a swipe. It was a gesture. One the scientists couldn't explain. One that didn't match any known behavior in predators like it. Alara raised her hand again, and for a moment, human and alien mirrored each other. Only the blue light of the energy field stood between them. That's when one of the young guards whispered, It cares about her." The others laughed, at first. "It's a beast," someone said. "It doesn't care, it can't." But no one could explain the way Zarnok looked at her. Not like food, not like prey, not even like a threat, like something more. And then came the test. Without warning, the station commander ordered a probe to release a shock pulse inside the cage. "We need to see if this connection is real," he said coldly, "or just timing." The pulse hit the predator in the side. It roared in pain, stumbled back, claws thrashing, tail slamming against the walls. Lights flickered. The force field cracked with static. Alara screamed, "Stop it!" Zarnok turned toward her, but it didn't attack. Even in pain, it didn't throw itself at the cage. It didn't lose control. Instead, it growled low and crouched again, its eyes locked on hers, wide and almost afraid. Alara ran up to the force field, her palms flat against it. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Zarnok's growls slowed. Its breathing settled. The commander ordered the pulse to stop. Everyone in the room stood frozen. What they had just seen shattered everything they believed. Zarnok had been attacked, and instead of lashing out, it turned to her for safety. That night, hundreds of alien species tuned into the live footage. They watched the predator lie down near the edge of the cage. It curled its tail around its body like a cat might. And even though Alara had gone for the night, the camera caught something unbelievable. Zarnok stayed facing the door she always entered from. Waiting. It didn't eat again until she came back. Whatever this was, it wasn't science anymore. It was something deeper. And across the galaxy, people began to ask the same question. Could the predator feel, or worse, could it love? The council wasn't happy. They had allowed Alara to visit the creature only for study. But now things were changing too fast. People across the galaxy had started calling the predator by a new name. Guardian. That made the council nervous. A predator wasn't supposed to be loved. It was supposed to be feared. Worse, some human colonies had started sending messages. If the predator can be tamed, maybe we were wrong to kill so many. That scared the alien leaders even more. They didn't want peace with monsters. Peace would mean they were wrong, and the galaxy didn't like being wrong, so they gave an order. Remove the human girl and the experiment. Alara didn't know that yet. She came in like always, holding a tray of food and a small folded blanket. "It's cold in here," she whispered through the energy field. Zarnok was already waiting near the front of the cage, still and silent. When he saw her, his tail gave one slow, lazy swing, a new habit he'd started only with her. She sat down beside the cage, placed the food gently on the ground, and smiled. "They say I'm crazy," she said, "but I don't care." Zarnok leaned close, pressing his head near the field again. Her hand met the same spot like always. But that day, the doors behind her opened, and it wasn't a good sound. 4 armored guards marched in, blasters ready. One of them called out, "Ilara Haynes, by council order, you are to leave the station immediately." She stood up, confused. "What? Why?" "It's too dangerous. You're interfering with classified research." Before she could answer, the guard stepped forward. One of them reached for her arm. That was a mistake. The predator saw it. Zarnok didn't roar. He screamed. A deep rumbling sound that made the walls shake. He threw his body into the force field, which flared bright blue from the hit. The guard stumbled back, suddenly afraid. Ilara turned to him wide-eyed. "Zarnok, no, stop!" But he wasn't trying to hurt her. He was trying to protect her. The scientists watching from the control room panicked. The commander shouted, "Get containment back online, raise the voltage." Another guard grabbed Ilara's wrist roughly. "You're leaving. Now." In that moment, the unthinkable happened. The cage's system overloaded. Too much power had built up from Zarnok's attack. The force field flickered, then collapsed. A sharp buzzing sound, a flash of light, and suddenly nothing stood between them and the galaxy's deadliest predator. For one terrible second, no one moved. Then Zarnok stepped out of the cage. Not with a leap, not with a roar, with silence. The soldiers pointed their weapons. "Fire!" But Ilara screamed, "No! Don't shoot!" Zarnok didn't look at the soldiers. He walked directly in front of her. Massive, dark, powerful. And then, he crouched down, low to the floor, not in attack mode, in defense. He placed himself between her and the guns. The guards hesitated. Their hands were shaking. One officer whispered, "It's shielding her." No one had ever seen anything like it. The predator wasn't hunting. It wasn't running. It was standing guard, its glowing eyes locked on the weapons. One step closer, and they all knew he would strike, but only to protect her. Ilara stepped forward, slowly. She placed a hand on Zarnok's thick-scaled shoulder. "Please," she said softly. "Let me talk to them." Zarnok didn't move. His muscles were tight, like steel cables. But he didn't stop her. Ilara turned to the guards. "You don't understand. It's not a monster anymore. It made a choice. It's choosing not to hurt you." The lead guard lowered his weapon just slightly. "This isn't normal," he said. "It's dangerous." "So are we," she replied. "And yet, look what it's doing. Wouldn't a real monster have already killed us?" Behind the glass in the control room, the scientists and commanders stared silent. Every sensor showed the truth. Zarnok's body was full of tension, but not rage. His heart rate was high, but not wild. He wasn't preparing to kill. He was afraid. Afraid for her. One of the scientists whispered, "What if it sees her as one of its own?" Eventually, the council's orders changed again. They couldn't risk another energy failure. They couldn't shoot Zarnok without sparking war with human colonies already watching the footage. So they allowed Ilara to stay, but with one warning. "The next time that cage opens, we won't hesitate." She nodded. But inside, she knew something had already changed forever. That night, the galaxy watched a silent video stream. A predator curled around a sleeping human girl, their bodies separated by just a few inches of glass. And no one could deny the truth anymore. Whatever this bond was, it was real. And soon, it would be tested like never before. The station was quiet again, for a little while. After the force field failure, the council doubled the security. Cameras were placed everywhere. Soldiers stood at every corner. The cage was rebuilt, stronger and colder. But Zarnok didn't seem to care. As long as Ilara came back each day, he stayed calm. She returned with the same soft voice, the same warm smile, and the same tray of food. Sometimes she brought pieces of tech to show him, sometimes just stories about Earth. Zarnok didn't speak, not with words, but he listened. His eyes followed her every move, and his body relaxed only when she was near. People started watching the daily visits across space. Millions tuned into the stream. Some called it dangerous. Others called it beautiful. But not everyone liked what was happening. One morning, the food tray was different. Ilara noticed right away. The smell was strange, metallic, too sharp. She frowned and looked at the guard who had handed it to her. He was new. His face was blank, but his eyes didn't meet hers. She walked into the feeding zone slowly, holding the tray with both hands. Zarnok stepped forward, eager. His claws gently tapped the floor as he came close. Ilara knelt down like always, placing the tray before him. But then, she paused. She looked at the food, then at him. Then, without a word, she picked up one of the pieces and tasted it. It took less than 10 seconds. Her face twisted. She coughed hard, then harder. Her knees gave out. She dropped the tray. Zarnok's body snapped forward. He caught her before she hit the floor, his massive arms wrapping around her like a shield. The guards rushed forward, but they didn't get far. Zarnok roared. This time, it was not a warning. It was rage. Alarm screamed. The control room lights flashed red. The predator held Ilara close and backed into the cage, snarling. He placed her gently on the floor and crouched over her as if trying to warm her with his own body. In the control room, chaos broke out. She tasted the food. "Get a med team now. It was poisoned." Who did this? But no one could. Get close. Zarnok wouldn't let them. His claws were out. His tail swept the floor behind him like a whip. He glared at the cameras, at the doors, at the guards. Every breath was a growl. He wasn't just protecting her. He was mourning her pain. Minutes passed. Then, she moved. Ilara coughed again and opened her eyes slowly. Zarnok. He let out a deep, broken sound. It wasn't a roar. It was almost a whimper. She touched his arm. "It's okay, I'm okay." The med team finally stepped forward, but they didn't dare approach until Zarnok looked at them, then slowly stepped back. Only 2 steps. His eyes locked on them the whole time. The doctors rushed in. One injected Ilara with a neutralizer. Another confirmed it. The food had been laced with slow poison. Enough to kill him. Enough to hurt her badly. Back in the control room, one of the scientists whispered, "She saved his life. She actually tasted the food first The footage spread across the stars, and this time even the council couldn't stop it. One headline read, "She trusted the monster more than her own people." Another, "Who's the real beast here?" The investigation began. Quietly, silently. The guard who brought the food was gone, vanished without a trace. A planted identity. No real records. Someone didn't want the predator alive. Or maybe they didn't want Alara alive either. But what they didn't expect was the result. The bond between human and predator grew stronger. Zarnak refused to eat anything for 3 days, until Alara brought the food herself. Only then did he accept it. He sat beside her as she rested against the cage wall. No words, no roars, just silence. A deep, powerful silence. That silence scared the council more than any roar ever could, because now they knew Zarnak wasn't just reacting. He was thinking. He had chosen her, and someone had just tried to take her away. The galaxy watched with breath held. The girl who fed the predator had now risked her life to protect it, and in return, the predator was no longer a prisoner. He was a guardian, and next time he would not step back. For 3 days, Alara stayed in the medical bay. Her body was weak, but her spirit was not. She kept asking only one question: "Is he okay?" The doctors didn't know how to answer. Physically, Zarnak was unharmed, but something had changed in him. He stopped moving, stopped reacting to the guards, the lights, the food. He just sat in his cage, unmoving, watching the entrance. Waiting. Alara insisted on returning the moment she could stand. She didn't care that her hands still shook. She didn't care that her legs barely held her weight. The moment the door opened, Zarnak stood up. He rushed to the edge of the cage, his eyes searching her face like he didn't believe it was real. Alara smiled softly, stepping closer. "I'm okay," she whispered, her voice still a little weak. "I'm still here." Zarnak didn't roar. He didn't growl. He didn't even move. Then, he opened his mouth, and one broken, deep sound came out. "Ara." She froze. So did everyone watching. The guards, the scientists, the viewers across the galaxy. He had spoken. It wasn't perfect. The sound was rough, heavy, like stones grinding together. But the name was clear. Alara. Her eyes filled with tears. "You said my name," she whispered, placing her hand against the energy barrier. Zarnak copied the motion from the other side. His massive claw gently touched the same spot. "Alara," he said again, this time a little clearer, a little softer. The room was silent. The cameras recorded everything. The control center didn't know whether to sound an alarm or fall to their knees. No one had ever heard a Carthan speak a human name, not even during war. Their vocal cords weren't meant for human sounds. And yet, he had done it, not out of force, not out of training. He had done it for her. Back in the council chambers, there was panic. He's becoming more than a prisoner. He's forming emotional attachment. This is dangerous. This is not what the program was for. But the people watching didn't see danger. They saw something else. Trust, bond, even affection. The public demanded answers. Why was a prisoner poisoned under their watch? Why was a young woman risking her life for a so-called monster? Why did the monster speak her name before any other word? The council responded with silence. Inside the station, Alara returned every day. Zarnak began to learn other words, small ones. Food. Safe. Stay. His voice was deep, slow, but he understood more than he could say. Alara began to teach him, not like a teacher with a student, but like a friend helping a friend. She brought pictures, small videos of Earth animals. He loved the ones with strong creatures, lions, bears, wolves. He growled in approval, trying to copy their sounds, sometimes making Alara laugh. One day she showed him a video of dolphins. Zarnak watched closely. Then he tilted his head and tapped the screen gently. "Smart," he said, slow and firm. Ilara nodded. "Yes, they are. Just like you." That night he didn't sleep. He sat in the corner of his cage thinking, because Zarnak was remembering something buried deep inside. He wasn't always a monster. He once had a name of his own. But war had stolen it. Torture had buried it. Hatred had erased it. Now, for the first time, someone gave him a new name, a name he chose to say. Ilara. It meant something to him. She wasn't just the girl who brought food. She wasn't just a voice in the darkness. She was his light. And even though he could barely speak, he knew what he would do. Now, protect her, at all cost. Even if it meant breaking the cage. Even if it meant standing against the ones who put him there. Because the galaxy might still call him a beast. But beasts do not speak names, and monsters do not love. The guards noticed the change in Zarnak's body language. He stood taller, more alert, more focused, not violent, but ready. Ilara noticed it too. "Are you okay?" she asked one evening, her hand pressed against the glass. Zarnak nodded slowly. Then, after a pause, he said something new. "You safe, with me." Ilara's breath caught. It wasn't just a sentence, it was a promise. The kind of promise you only hear once in a lifetime. And the galaxy didn't know it yet. But that promise would soon shake every star in the sky. The silence before the storm didn't last long. Ilara's friendship with Zarnak was now known across hundreds of star systems. The news channels couldn't stop talking about it. Half of the galaxy was amazed. The other half was afraid. A predator, once called a war criminal, had bonded with a human. He had learned her name. He had spoken it. The council called for an emergency meeting. Too many eyes were watching, too many questions were being asked. And the most dangerous question of all was now floating in public. What if the predator is not the monster we believed? That question scared the council more than Zarnak ever did. They decided quickly. Ilara had to be removed from the station. They called it a routine reassignment. They didn't tell her why. They didn't give her a choice. 2 officers were sent to escort her out the next morning. But what they didn't realize was that Zarnak already knew. He had listened to the whispers in the dark. He had seen the pattern in the guards' movements. He had learned the smell of lies. So when the 2 officers entered the observation room, Ilara was already there, sitting near the cage with a strange look in her eyes. "You're being transferred," one officer said, not unkindly. "Another station. You'll be safer there." Ilara didn't answer. Zarnak stood still, inside the cage, but his body was tense. His claws were pressed into the floor. His eyes didn't blink. The second officer took a step toward her. "Come on, you've done enough, it's time to go." Then Ilara did something simple, something small. She stepped back, closer to the cage. The 2 officers exchanged a quick look. One of them reached out gently. "Please don't make this harder." Zarnak's head snapped up. He stepped forward. Fast. The guards reached for their stun batons, but it was already too late. With a sound like thunder, Zarnak slammed his fist against the barrier. The force field sparked and cracked. Not broken, but hurting. The lights flickered. The air pressure dropped. "Ilara, safe," he growled, deep and low. The officers froze. Ilara turned, looking at him. "Zarnak." He looked back at her, something burning in his eyes. It wasn't just anger, it was fear. He knew what the council was doing, and he knew that if she left, she might never come back. She turned to the officers. "I'm not going." "You don't have a choice," one said, firmer now. Zarnak growled again. "Ilara, stay." This time the words were clearer, stronger. Not just a copy of human language. This was his will. The force field around the cage pulsed again. Warning lights turned red. Zarnak placed both hands against the barrier. And slowly, painfully began to push. The station trembled. The barrier bent. Not fully, but enough to scare everyone. "I won't go," Ilara shouted. "You don't understand. If you take me away, he will break out. And then he won't stop." The officers hesitated. The control room was listening, watching, and they made a decision. "Stand down." The order came through the speakers. The officers looked at each other, then stepped back. "This isn't over," one of them muttered. "No," Ilara said, quietly. "It's just beginning." The next day, extra guards arrived, but none entered the room again. Zarnak sat close to the edge of the cage. Ilara sat across from him. Between them, there was only a thin line of light. She placed her OE hand near it. He placed his beside hers. They didn't need words anymore. Outside the station, the pressure was growing. More species wanted answers. Why was the predator still alive? Why had the human girl protected him? Why had he nearly escaped? And most of all, why had the council hidden the truth for so long? There were rumors now. Rumors that Zarnak had surrendered in the war, not been captured. Rumors that he had tried to save civilians during the last battle. Rumors that the real monsters were the ones who chose to keep him locked away. Back on the station, Ilara sat quietly, thinking. Zarnak looked at her, then asked something simple. "You go?" She shook her head. "No, not without you." He paused. Then, slowly, spoke again. "Then, I come." Her heart stopped. He wasn't joking. And in that moment she realized Zarnak had made up his mind. He would escape. He would follow her, not to harm, but to protect. Because now the galaxy had made one mistake too many. They tried to steal the only person who had shown him kindness. And the predator they feared was finally waking up. Alarms echoed through the station just after midnight. Red lights flashed across the walls. Security teams rushed to their posts. Lockdowns were triggered one by one. The predator's cage was still sealed, but the sensors told a different story. Zarnak wasn't trying to escape. He was preparing for something else. He sat in the middle of the cage, eyes closed, calm, waiting. Ilara, locked in her room, paced back and forth. She knew what this meant. The council wasn't going to just transfer her anymore. They were planning to remove her completely, quietly. No more media, no more attention, just gone. They had lost control of the story, and that made her dangerous. But what they didn't realize was that Ilara wasn't alone anymore. Zarnak had waited patiently, day after day, learning the system, watching every guard, every schedule. He had never once acted like a beast. He had acted like a soldier. Now, he was ready. And he wasn't escaping from the station. He was escaping for her. The first breach came from the East Wing, an energy overload that shut down 2 security layers. The guards scrambled. It looked like a technical failure, but it wasn't. Zarnak was testing the walls. The council ordered full lockdown. That's when Zarnak stood and walked straight to the edge of his cage. "Ilara," he said, his voice deep and clear. "Now." She understood. In the hallway, one of the guards made a mistake. He entered, her room alone, holding stun cuffs. She didn't fight him, she just asked one question. "Do you believe I'm safer without him?" The guard hesitated, and that pause was long enough for the power to go out. Total darkness fell. Emergency. Lights flickered on, but by then the walls of the predator's cage had collapsed. The glass didn't shatter. It bent, cracked, and then exploded outward, like something inside had simply refused to be contained. Zarnak didn't run. He walked. Straight through the smoke. Straight past the shocked guards. None of them dared move. Not because they were afraid of being attacked, but because they saw something terrifying. He wasn't angry. He was focused. Zarnak reached Ilara's room in less than 2 minutes. The door was locked, but he didn't even touch it. Ilara, he said again. She stepped forward. I'm here. He reached out and pulled the door apart with one hand. Sparks flew, metal twisted. She rushed into his arms without thinking. For a moment the galaxy didn't exist, just the girl, and the creature who was no longer a prisoner. Sirens blared louder now. More guards arrived. This time, weapons were drawn. Step away from the human, one shouted. Zarnok didn't move. Ilara stood in front of him, arms wide. You'll have to shoot through me. That was when the guard captain lowered his weapon and said, No one fires. The rest of the team froze. Zarnok looked into the captain's eyes and nodded once. Without a word, he turned and started walking, with Ilara beside him. No one stopped them. They passed through blast doors, through barriers that were supposed to hold back monsters. The station's final gate opened slowly, and there it stood, a transport shuttle just big enough for two. Zarnok paused. Ilara turned to the watching soldiers, scientists, and commanders. We were never enemies, she said quietly. You just never gave him a chance. Then she took Zarnok's hand, and they boarded the ship. The hatch closed, the engines ignited, and together, they left the station behind. What followed shocked the galaxy. 100 systems watched the footage. Of the predator who protected a human, of the human who stood between guns and a so-called monster, and of the moment he spoke to the galaxy for the first time. She is not prey. Those 4 words, broadcast by accident through the station's communication lines, traveled farther than any threat ever had. Protests erupted, demands for truth. Hidden war records were leaked. Stories of Carthans who surrendered and were silenced. Of peace offers rejected by human generals. Of prisoners tortured, not questioned. The galaxy began to see the truth, and the truth was simple. Not all monsters were beasts, and not all humans were heroes. Ilara and Zarnok disappeared for a while. Some said they hid on the edge of known space. Others believed they were building something new, somewhere free, somewhere quiet. But everyone remembered the moment the predator refused to kill and spoke her name instead. Because when the galaxy tried to tear them apart, it made one mistake. It forgot what humans do best. They protect the ones they love, even if that love looks nothing like anyone expects, even if it changes the whole universe.